Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to the long-awaited Jeskai roundtable with Harlan Fear, Jonathan Rosum, and me. Now, you probably already noticed by the title of this video that this is part one of the Jeskai roundtable. I met with Harlan and Jonathan and we had more to say than I expected, and in short, we just ran out of time. We tried to meet again, but we had some scheduling conflicts, and now that the holidays are on us, it's probably going to be January 14th before we can meet again. But I absolutely refuse to make all of you wait, especially after that big announcement video. I refuse to make you guys wait that long. So I thought it best to go ahead and take what we had so far, edit it together, and give you part one of the Jeskai roundtable. Now, before I get started, I have a very special thank you to all of my viewers who participated by asking us questions via Facebook, YouTube, Discord, MTG Salvation, and my YouTube channel. Thank you. And one last thing before I get started, I want to put a link up in the right-hand corner of the screen to my vlog playlist so that if you haven't already, you can check out the other Magic the Gathering related vlogs that I've done. Okay, without any more waiting, let's get started with the Jeskai roundtable. Hi everybody, and welcome to the Jeskai roundtable. I mentioned it to you a couple of weeks ago. You submitted your questions, and in the meantime, I got a hold of these two gentlemen I have on the line with me, Harlan Fear and Jonathan Rosum. If you don't know Harlan and Jonathan, they have both been very successful at kind of putting Jeskai back on the map. And, you know, if you know my opinions, it never left. But for the greater Magic community, I'll say, like, they really helped put it back on the map. And I want to just share a couple of their results with you. First off, we have Jonathan. He's had 3 recent top 8s in Star City Games Opens. And for those of you that might not know, these are large events. Compared to what we have over here in Europe, you know, we're talking close to 1,000 players quite regularly. They are pretty big. So he's had 3 recent top 8s in those, and then also had a top 32 with Death's Shadow, which is he had just before he discovered the joy that is Jeskai. And then next up we have Harlan, who has also just been killing it. He had a recent top 32 with Kiki Moon. He won Star City Games Louisville with Jeskai mid-range / tempo. I can never figure out what to call it. He had a top 8, 2 top 32s, a top 16, and then both of them have a slew of Magic Online 5.0s. So congratulations, guys. I would say that you were both definitely just murdering it.
I know. Geist is great. Just kill him. Play it on turn 3. Your win rate will go up.
around here, saying Geist is great will win you a lot of friends, I promise you. Okay, so the first question I have for you guys is just going to be real generic, and I guess, Harlan, we'll start with you. But it's just like, what are your general... I'm not talking about a matchup analysis, but like real high level, like why do you like Jeskai? You know, why would you pick it for a tournament? You know, what do you like about the deck, and what don't you like about the deck? Just some generic stuff.
So a little background about my modern decks that I always play. They always consist of 12 cards, 4 Lightning Bolts, 4 Snapcaster Mage, and 4 Serum Visions.
You're a man after my own heart.
Yeah. Those are the only requirements of a deck that I play. So I came to Jeskai because I thought Path was really good, and Geist seemed like a pretty good Etherling type card at the time in the format, where like you could play it on turn 3 and usually they just die, or you can play it on turn 10 and they don't have the resources to deal with it and they just die. So that's when I started playing Jeskai. Spell Queller, Kevin Jones finally convinced me to play it, and that card is the truth.
Yeah,
I think Spell Queller is significantly better than Geist. Sorry, everyone. Geist is kind of like a tool you use to like make some matchups better, and like it's bad in a lot. But Spell Queller is just pretty much one of your best cards in almost every matchup. And I think Spellquire is like the reason to play Jeskai nowadays.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of those sentiments. And what about you, Jonathan? What do you like about Jeskai? Why do you play it?
I like Jeskai because your cards have a lot of like flexibility. So like you're like a bunch of removal spells like Path like hits like creatures and stuff, but your burn spells, the best target usually is like actually just their face.
Mm-hmm.
The thing about I like playing about Jeskai is that like once you have turned the corner in a specific game, like after you've already used like a cryptic command or like you spell card their spell or like snap anything, you just get to turn these like removal spells into burn spells just to end the game on the spot. And I feel like the Jeskai deck is actually really good at pressuring your opponent. Like in some matchups, you just literally play Snapcaster as a 2/1 and just start attacking, and then you just like your burn spell just lob his face. That's how I feel like you beat like decks like Tron. The thing I don't like about the deck is that your draws, like you're dense in like removal spells, which makes like some matchups like a lot worse. So like say you're not like great against like Eldrazi Tron if they have like Chalice, or like you're not good against the big mana decks.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't draw your counter magic and you draw all your burn spells, you're just going to end up losing those games.
Yeah, I think, everybody here has probably heard me talk about this deck so much, but just kind of to reiterate some of those points, it took me a little bit of time to come around to Spellqueller 2, but what I think it really did for the deck is it just there's like a density of interaction that wasn't there before. And the problem is, you have this, you have a deck in which you're kind of trying to, some of it's reactive, some of it's proactive, but what Spellqueller does is it does both of those things at the same time, all in one card. Yep. And it simultaneously makes your logic knots, or it makes your 2-mana counters and your 4-mana counters better. Because if you have a Spellqueller in hand and you kind of have an idea what they might be doing, you're like, okay, I can counter this spell on 2, hold a Queller, and if they tap out for that, and then I get to untap with Cryptic Command, you just had this like amazing chain of reaction in which you were also able to put pressure onto the battlefield at the same time. And so,
you have a clock that interacts with your opponent. That's it's really good.
And one of the things I also mentioned to my viewers a lot is, and Spellqueller does this as well, is I'm like, so much of the deck ends up being kind of modal, and it's like if you need your bolts to play control, you can do that. If you need them to be a clock, you can do that. If you need Queller to be interactive, it is. If you need it to be a clock, it is. Same with Snapcaster Mage. Yep. And then, especially if you're running cards like Geist, your Cryptic Commands can also be used in a very proactive fashion as well. Okay, so kind of another, like, just more general question for you guys. How do you feel Jeskai has been positioned over the last 3 months or so? And then how do you think that might be changing now, if anything? What do you think, Jonathan?
I think that right now in Modern, Jeskai is currently at its worst. I feel like people are beginning to realize that the way to fight decks like Lantern Control is just by playing decks like Tron. And the issue I have with Jeskai against Tron is that you don't have a lot of cards that do a lot, and you just find yourself like on the back foot if they ever like have their unfair draws. And people are beginning to realize that like they have to start respecting Spellqueller. And a lot of opponents, like decks, are configured in a way where they're not going to lose to Jeskai because they're just adding more removal spells to their deck so they can deal with your Spellquellers. The issue I have with the humans matchup now currently is that my teammate and Collins have tested the matchup extensively, and when they just start leaving in the Reflector Mages, it's actually just really hard for you to actually win games of Magic if you're relying on Spellqueller because they just Reflector Mage it and you're just so far behind.
What do you think, Harlan?
So I think Jeskai was really good for the last 3 months, and I think it had some weaknesses still in Eldrazi Tron being as popular as it was, and you kind of just had to get lucky and dodge that one. Dredge has always been really bad, but now they're like Lantern is getting more popular, and I think that matchup's really tough unless you like really commit to it.
Ceremonious and stuff.
And then everyone knowing that the deck is popular, not only knowing it's good, is they actually are rewarded if they try and fix the matchup and learn it. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have the same edge it used to. And the trade-off of having all your cards be flexible, like we talked about earlier, is that they're a little bit weaker. And so if your opponent is prepared for them and can play a game with them, your cards just aren't actually that strong.
Yeah. I agree. I think the appeal of like when I play the deck in like top 4 Syracuse and top 8 Richmond, like when I played like Geist of Saint Traft or I had Spell Queller, it just caught like most of my opponents off guard. They just like weren't prepared to deal with these cards, and they just got punished because they couldn't deal with it. Now people know that there's Geist and Spell Queller in your deck, and now they're not like changing the contents of their deck. They're just changing how they play against you, so they don't get blown out by these cards.
Yeah, I think that is a huge point. As I kind of was telling you guys before we started recording, and as my viewers will know, I basically always play some version of Jeskai at every paper event I play at and on Magic Online. And it was definitely something that I always noticed when I was like always the only guy playing Jeskai and it wasn't really very popular. You like slam Geist and you just get that guy gets a look on his face. He's like, I have no way to beat that card. I wasn't prepared for that. Or, when you like Spell Queller like twice in a row and they're just like, I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think about playing around that card. And that's just not the case anymore. I was just talking to, I did some play testing with some friends last week, and he was playing Ponza, and he was basically saying like, oh, he's going to start like putting like 3 or 4 bolts in the sideboard for the Jeskai matchup. And I was like, that's weird that you put bolts in the board for the Jeskai matchup, but it's because of Spell Queller. It's like if you can just bolt your Queller and then Stone Rain your land anyway, great for him. So I think having it be a known quantity is definitely weakens it. And then I think we're also seeing somewhat of what a lot of people would say is a traditional shift in the overall modern metagame, in that Grixis Death Shadow was some people would say the best deck, and so I think Jeskai kind of rose up, because I'm not going to say that it had a great Death Shadow matchup, because I don't know exactly where those percentages lie, but as far as like other fair decks against it, it probably had the best Death Shadow matchup. And I know I was gonna say, I know, John, that we actually approached that matchup a little bit different, and I do want to talk about that. But so now you have like this sort of fair like blue mid-rangey tempo-y control deck, and like Tron's just gonna eat your lunch. So there, if it's at number 1 at all the reports, all those guys are just gonna, it's gonna start creeping up, and I think that's what you have as far as like this overall like, and if Tron starts doing good, then decks that Jeskai could have preyed on might start coming back, and you get some kind of larger cycle. But go ahead, you were gonna say something.
So the modern metagame just like constantly changes. So this weekend, like I think Jeskai wouldn't be a very good choice, which is why I'm not playing it on the PTQ. I just think that the big mana decks are really popular, and so I feel as though people are just like I would be fine getting paired against like the shadow decks and the humans decks that are trying to beat them. However, I don't want to get paired against Tron. I feel like you have the tools to win, but it's still going to be really hard for you, and you have to like play your game plan in a way where that like you will probably get blown out by a top deck if they ever draw something. Like I like plenty of times against Tron, I'm just like, well, I have lethal next turn if you don't draw X, and then
fingers crossed.
You're like crossing your fingers, and you're like, are you dead?
You're absolutely right. In fact, since the conversation's leading us that way, I want to talk a little bit about the Tron and Lantern matchup. The last couple of paper events that I played in which I ended up playing against Tron, I think once or twice in each matchup, but basically my plan was like, all right, I'm playing against Tron. Their late game's going to be better than mine. I'm going to have to get them dead as quickly as I can. And like both match wins came with literally like an Ulamog on the stack, and like me figuring out like what did I have to like do as far as like bolt or snapping and bolt and pathing while I targeted this to try and like get the final points of lethal in, and if I drew this next turn it would win. They were so razor thin. And obviously, like, I think you just kind of have to have a plan against them and just hope it goes your way, and that's not what you don't want to be in that position if you know you're going to run into that deck a lot. So about Tron and Harlan, let me know what you think. Is there we know that the matchup can be tough for the Jeskai pilot. Do you think, is it worth trying to fix? Like, and the reason I kind of mention this is sort of predicated on the fact that when the deck is a top deck in Modern, that's like 7% of the metagame. It could be like the best deck, and you could go to a GP and like not play it. So do you if you feel like Tron is on the upswing, but you are gonna play Jeskai anyway? Like maybe you're not, but like for my viewers out there who maybe they're dedicated Jeskai pilots, do you think the matchup is worth trying to fix in some ways? Do you ignore it? How would you approach it?
So I always look at the Tron decks as Eldrazi Tron versus, I call it Vanilla Tron, whether that be mono green, green black, or green white. But basically the big Tron Karn decks versus the Thought Not Seer Reality Smasher decks. I think Jeskai is actually like slightly ahead against the Vanilla Tron decks because they have basically 20 lands, 20-ish cantrips, and then 20-ish payoffs with some removal mixed in there in certain numbers. And you have like 15 or 18 counter spells post board that are just hard counters, and you can actually just run them out of threats. And like every time Wormcoil is their payoff, you're like, path it, and now I didn't even have to use a counter spell. So against the normal Tron deck, I think Jeskai is actually a little bit ahead, and I've had really good success against that version with Jeskai. But Eldrazi Tron is just abysmal. I think I'm like I think I'm like 1-9 against it or something. It's like horrendous. I consider it just a loss. The things that I've tried to do to win have like given me some edge, but like I'm like bending over backwards to get to what I feel is like maybe 40% in the matchup.
Yeah, I feel the same way that Harlan feels. Harlan actually, I was going to register Ceremonious Rejection in my sideboard for I don't remember what open was. Charlotte.
I think it was Richmond, maybe.
It was Charlotte because it was a tournament after I topped. It's a tournament after you won.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And when I was talking to you, and when you were like, "Yeah, I'm not playing Ceremonious," and I asked you why, and your logic was like, "What? Like, Lantern isn't popular. Eldrazi Tron is such a lost cause anyway that it's not going to win you that many games, and that Affinity matchup's already good. Like, you're just like wasting a sideboard slot in the manner to just like make your really good matchup better and make your really awful matchup like maybe give you like 2.5% or something." What the logic came down to. And the thing about Eldrazi Tron is that it doesn't like you can beat their fair draws. It's the draws where they either like Cavern Souls you or they have a Chalice on one that are just like completely unwinnable. The issue I have is that like their Cavern, they just like Expedition map. They don't even get a Tron land or an Eldrazi Temple. They're just like Cavern Souls you. And you're just like, I can't do anything. These cryptics don't do anything. Like these logic knots don't do anything. Like you might be able to like path them, but then at some point they're just gonna have a threat in play, and you're like, well, I only have 4 paths in my deck, and if I don't draw a Snapcaster, I can't path everything you play, and I'm gonna lose.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I feel the exact same way. In fact, when Eldrazi Tron was first coming on the scene, I recognized it at the time, but I was having pretty good success against them, and the reason was they weren't getting Cavern. And now that Jeskai is such a known quality, I feel like the moment they know I'm playing Jeskai, they just get a Cavern, and the matchup just goes.
Yep.
Because if they don't get a Cavern of Souls, which some lists in the past, some of them ran only one, and maybe even the very beginning some ran none. I can't remember. And they didn't always get it, and then your counter spells were live, and you could actually crush them. But now they just get Cavern of Souls and just make all of your cards look like they don't do anything.
One time, I think it was in the previous Charlotte Open, the one about 5 months ago, I was playing Jeskai, and I played against Eldrazi Tron that didn't have a single Cavern in a 75, and I happened to have 4 Ceremonious Rejection in my deck.
Oh my gosh.
In my sideboard.
You crushed him.
I got smashed.
Oh, you still got smashed.
Chalice for one.
Yeah, it wasn't even close. It's just embarrassing, that matchup.
Yeah.
Like I whenever Eldrazi Tron people will ask me how to beat Jeskai or like how they should board or whatever in the matchup, I just tell them just you get more percentage points just demoralizing your opponent by just setting your deck box further away from you and continuing to shuffle and presenting your main deck again.
Yeah,
because you're that far ahead that you can do that. It's better to just demoralize them that way.
Yeah. Um, I like what you guys said about ceremonious rejection too, because I kind of came to the same conclusion and communicated that to my viewers, which was we have percentage points to give against affinity. But the one thing at the time that I liked about Disdainful Stroke, is the card that I was replacing it with, was it did everything you wanted it to do against Tron, Vanilla Tron. Against Eldrazi Tron, it might do some things, but then at the time, against Valakut, it kind of did everything you wanted it to do against Valakut as well.
When you board it in, it's counterspell. That's what the card is.
I actually do think that Ceremonious Rejection's coming back to the forefront. Like, Lantern is picking up.
Yeah.
And, like, Lantern's pretty bad. But if you have the Ceremonious Rejections, the matchup gets really good. And Ceremonious Rejection's, like, the best card you can play against the Vanillatron decks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you have a chance to even potentially hit their map on one if you want it, and Ceremonious Rejection's so efficient that you can always flash it back with Snapcaster Mage pretty easily.
Yeah, that, and, like, against them, Geist is just your best card. So, like, being able to play Geist on 4 with Ceremonious up and just being completely protected from whatever they do is fantastic. But also, they don't have any weapons to fight through a Ceremonious Rejection other than just casting a big spell. They aren't like Eldrazi Tron where they have Caverns and Chalice of the Voids.
Yeah.
They just have to tap their 7 mana and hope it's not there.
Yeah. The only concern I have with Ceremonious against the Lantern decks currently, and it's like minor, but it's War of Invention. So that they're all playing 4 War of Invention, and they can pour out their bridges.
That's super annoying. What you have to do again, I've played against...
I've been boarding in Dispel.
No, I bring in 2 Dispels because... Let's just switch over to Lantern. But I very strongly feel about the Lantern matchup in a similar way that I do to the Affinity matchup, in that the only card that matters is Bridge. Like, everything else is just like, you could, not that you want to ignore it, but, and actually Lantern kind of matters because that gives them the information they need. But for the most part, like, if you can beat the Bridge, you can beat Lantern. The same way that the only card in Affinity, to my opinion, that really matters is like Etch Champion, because you can kind of just beat everything else. But if they ever resolve that card, it's like, you know, I will leverage my life total against Affinity to like critical levels to make sure that I can counter their Etch Champion. But I think that matchup is really about the Bridge. So since we're talking about Lantern, Jonathan, like, how do you approach that matchup? What do you think Jeskai pilots can do to make it better? We talked about Ceremonious Rejection, but maybe a bit specifically, what would you do? I
think overloading on counter magic is really important. Like, I played against Lantern in the Open that I did poorly in, the Envy Open. I just had a bad weekend with Jeskai that weekend, but like I just was like, well, I didn't have any counter magic because I have like these Disdainful Strokes that like don't really do anything. I have this spell which only counters Whir, but I don't have a lot of hard counter magic. Like, I have an Abrade and I have any, like, those come in. But I think that if you add Ceremonious Rejection against that matchup, it actually just, like, the matchup percentage just increases. And I think it's important against them to make sure that you have, like, some form of clock, whether it be Snapcaster, Spellcaller, or Geist, while also having just, like, multiple pieces of counter magic. And I think those games where you just, like, have one threat and you're just backed with, like, a bajillion counter spells, the games are really hard to lose.
I think the matchup, you can approach it 2 ways, and it's really dependent on your draw. If you can keep them from getting the Lantern lock set up, like if you can I fight over every Codex Shredder I can, every Pixis I can. Obviously, I'll fight over Lantern if I get the chance, but that one's pretty hard because I usually just play that one immediately on turn 1. Those games are really easy because they don't have card advantage. So if you can trade off for a lot of their resources, you can eventually deal with the Bridge if there's not anything else going on. Mm-hmm. Or if they have the lock set up, you need to make sure you keep a Bridge from being in play, because once that Bridge is in play, if they have the lock set up, you're not getting it out of play.
Now one card I'm a bit curious about in that matchup is By Force. And the reason I'm a bit curious about it is sometimes one of the problems is you're stuck under not one, but maybe 2 bridges. And you might have a Geist resolved. You might have like some threats resolved, but it again, this all depends on like how much information they know, like what they know you already have, and then like what they've milled over and what you've been able to get in your hand via some combination of like fetching at the appropriate time or electrolyzing them to try to draw a card. But one of the reasons I'm a bit curious about By Force is it's 1 in an X, I think is what it is, and X is destroy that many target artifacts. But if
Yep.
you can ever get a Snapcaster Mage in your hand, they usually give you a lot of lands. You might be able to Snapcaster Mage and then by force multiple of their ensnaring bridges, and you'll blow up as much stuff as you can, obviously, but it's probably going to be so much easier to do than something like Shatterstorm, which you'd have to have
or
like,
Vandal Blast or something like that.
you have to like 6 mana to like Shatterstorm them with a Snapcaster Mage, whereas if you're at 5 mana I guess if you're at 5 mana, or even if they have a bridge, even if it's just one of those situations, at 4 mana you can by force the 1 bridge. At 5 mana you could by force 2 bridges, and so on and so forth. And then obviously it's also going to be great if you have it in your hand. It's reasonable against Affinity, but it is one card I haven't tested it, but it is one that I do want to test.
Byforce is one I've played in other shells. I haven't really tried it much in Jeskai. But what I've run into with that card is that it's a little too narrow for my liking. It's really good against Lantern, and it's like passable against Affinity. But usually when you're playing these blue-red decks, the cards that Byforce helps clean up against are the cards you're already naturally good against with just Lightning Bolt and Snapcaster Mage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
like you're already good against Affinity.
Yeah, and Byforce just isn't very good in other matchups.
Yeah.
So I feel like we're going really narrow for a card that's really high impact in a matchup that's not very popular.
Yeah.
And I think you can get there with cards that are a little broader.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
like
I would
you
agree
could
with
play
that.
a second engineered explosives because their entire lock costs 1. So if you ever draw that explosives, you can just play it on 1 and pop it, and it cleans up their entire board.
They can be built with Academy Ruins. I mean, it's slow, but
yeah,
if you're stuck under
you
a
obviously
bridge,
have to have some pressure in there.
right.
The way I usually clean up 2 bridges is eventually they'll find something that they keep in their hand, and then I'll bounce one of the or bounce anything with a cryptic and draw a card. And then that'll put them to 2 cards so I can alpha them with some Snapcaster Mages and Quellers.
And obviously we also have the Cryptic command for the Cryptic Bounce Bridge deal.
Yep. But yeah, I think Byforce is just a little bit too narrow. Mm-hmm. But I think it is a very useful tool for that matchup.
Mm-hmm. I think that, for Byforce in general, I'm in the same, I feel the same way about it as Harlan does. I feel like my sideboard cards need to do more. The thing about Jeskai is all your cards are just kind of like, on power level individually, are kind of just like, meh. They're just like, they're very fair Magic cards.
Sure.
And the thing is that I want to make sure that my sideboard slots, I want each thing to come in multiple matchups, which is why I currently still play my Braid, because I board in against Affinity, I board in against Humans, I board against any Vile deck, and I get the board in against Lantern because it blows up an artifact.
Yeah, no, I think a Braid is good. I'm still not sure if I want to take out the Wear Tear for it, but of course I might be being a little bit results oriented because of course. In one league, I swapped it out and played against the Blood Moon deck, and I was like, "Damn you, a Braid."
I definitely prefer the one Wear Tear before the Abrade, and then I like having the Abrade as a second Shatter.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
That's the way I view the 2 cards.
I think right now I would cut the Abrade and have a Wear Tear in it because now people are just going back to Blood Moon decks. If people don't play Tron, they're just or Grixis Shadow, they're like, well, all my blue decks need to have Blood Moon in them. Blood Moon, yeah. And I'm just like, okay. Because I every league I play against at least one Blood Moon deck. At least one. In this week. It was just and I one of my losses with Jeskai is I just got Blood Moon, and I'm like, I hate everything.
Getting Blood Moon on turn 3, I feel like I usually know it's coming, but the one time I really am just tilt is when they Blood Moon you on 2.
Yeah, and you're on the draw. That happened to me twice in the open. I was on the draw, my opponent went turn 2 Blood Moon, and I'm like, I'm dead.
Great game. That was fun.
Yeah,
that
was
skilled
fun.
Opponent. Okay, so before I want to make sure that I get to as many questions as we can because everybody took the time to submit them. But I want to kind of do. I know one of the questions I saw is what do they think of Jeskai as a position? What matchups is it good, bad against? Stuff like that. I think that one was asked multiple times. So what I'd like to do over here on my iPad, I just have the modern metagame from Goldfish pulled up, and what I want to do just real quick is I'm gonna name a deck, and then you guys just be like good matchup, bad matchup, kind of in the middle, and then people can kind of come back and take from that what they will.
Okay.
So Affinity.
Good.
I would say it's good, but pretty close to the middle. I don't think it's as good as most people think it is. And I think if you play against smart affinity players, you're going to have a hard time.
Would agree with that.
Yeah, would agree there as well.
I do think it's in there. I do think it's in the favor, but I will say the one, in my opinion.
I think we're ahead.
Yeah.
I think against like a not great affinity player, we're like 75, 80%. And like against a good affinity player, we're like 55, 65.
Yeah, it's like 55, 60%, I think is where that math ends up. It's just like, the good affinity pilots will like choke you at certain points in the game, or they try to like two relevant threats, whether it be Arcbound or Edge Champion or like any of their threes in another play. It's just like they sequence their spells in such a way where that they really choke you on your mana. So in those matchups, you generally have to take quite a few damage off your lands, so you can like have a logic knot up on two,
Sure.
like just as a force spike for one, or just like being able to cast your removal spells or multiple spells. You're going to have to take a few points of damage.
I feel like when you play against a really good affinity pilot, because the real hard.
Yeah,
yeah. It goes from like do I'm just slinging my spells to like they haven't done much, and I'm just like, okay, what are they holding?
Yeah, no,
how are they trying to outsequence me? I need to outsequence them.
It's the scariest when they go like turn one, like land Springleaf Drum go, and I'm terrified. I'm more terrified of that than when they play like any other, like if they go like Ornithopter Vault Scourge or something. I'm like, they just played Springleaf Drum and said go.
I feel like sometimes the really good affinity pilots are really good at being like, I'm going to sequence things in a way that if you deal with all of this basically they're good at setting things up in a way such that they make you have to deal with all of this stuff like right now, and then if you do and you have to, then they have the window to resolve an Edge Champion, and then you're just like, ugh.
Yeah.
But then if you don't do it, then you die.
I think this argument's more relevant in game 2 when they have like cards like Blood Moon and Aether Grid in their deck, because they like Aether Grid is a huge issue.
All right, I said rapid fire, and then it wasn't rapid.
Number 1, we spend a few minutes on.
Okay, so we got affinity. I'm just going through the list. What about Jeskai control? And I'll say too, the mirror. I guess there's not much to say about the mirror. The mirror's the mirror. You probably win with Geist, but I'll hear what you guys have to say about it. Well, let's say the mirror, and then classic Jeskai control, like Drago.
I think the mirror is in the mirror. I think there's a check. So there's a Geist check, and then if Geist isn't on the battlefield, then it's super like player dependent.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like the more skilled like in like the mirror is generally like, so if they don't have Geist, you just like the key to the mirror turns out is just don't miss your land drops. So you can like when you play your spell on turn 13, you get to like have multiple counter spells up. It's usually the first person who trips on mana is the person who just actually just loses the game when there's no Geist on the battlefield. So I think that matchup is like, it's kind of weird because some opponents will just slam their Geist. I'm still not sure if it's correct to just slam it on turn 3 or not, but if they can just like play it on turn 3, if you don't have the answer, you're going to lose. And I feel like Jeskai control is bad.
Bad for you.
Bad for me.
Yeah, I think obviously the spell color mirror is 50% because someone will always win. I think it is skill dependent. I think you want to try and hit all your lands. Geist is a big deal, but I don't think it's as big of a deal as a lot of people think it is. You have some... Basically, as long as you have some creatures, you just need to like put bodies in front of it, and you have Lightning Helix in case you take a lot of damage. But the Drago version is really bad. I think you have to play Molten Rain right now on your sideboard so that you can kill a Search for Azcanta once it's flipped. It also lets you board out your paths so that you can hit Colonnades with the Molten Rains. But basically the best way to win that matchup is just on turn 5 play Geist with Logic Not Up. And hope they don't have Verdict.
Yeah, and literally pray they don't have the Verdict. Yeah, that's effectively where I'm at. That's the only reason why I beat Nikolic, like the top 8 Richmond, was that like I had Geist, had Logic Not Up, and then like he just didn't have Verdict. I'm like, well, all right, I guess I got lucky.
Yeah, if you can resolve Geist and they don't have Verdict, I think you're in pretty good shape. But
you're in a good spot. But their cards are just more powerful than yours. So that's kind of where
And if
we're
they
at.
can ever do one of those, like, they get in some fight and then they resolve a giant Sphinx's Revelation, like, okay, we're done.
Oh, you're dead. Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot of spells. Like a giant Secure the Waste, you're dead. A giant Revelation, you're dead.
I want
A
to.
flip
Torrential
Search of
Gearhulk,
Iskantha.
you're usually dead.
Yeah,
I was gonna
Torrential
say.
Gearhulk, you're gonna lose.
I played the Aliantrazi list in the league that's going to show next week, and I would have gone 4-1, but I played like really loose on one match for funsies, kind of sorta. But oh my gosh, like, Glimmer of Genius, like having the option to like, oh, I don't have to use this cryptic command, I'll Glimmer of Genius instead, was totally nuts. And then Torrential Gearhulk on Glimmer of Genius was also like
Standard.
it was completely insane.
Yeah.
Just because it's like, wait a second, I'm gonna put this 5/5 in and then scry 2, draw 2 and instant speed, and then you also have like this Azcanta shenanigans going on. I definitely feel like for traditional Jeskai draw go, it's somewhere in the plane. It's somewhere in the plane Azcanta with like maybe a Glimmer and at least one Gearhulk, because like that stuff just felt super powerful.
Yeah.
Okay, next deck, good, bad, great, whatever. 5 clear humans for Jeskai mid range.
Great.
Really good.
Storm.
Great.
Great. However, it's a hard matchup to master.
Yes.
Would agree with that. I felt like I saw like just how good it could go for us in one game where my opponent they don't play a lot of lands. I killed his first threat, had 3 mana up, and I just kept spell quelling. Like he tried to play like 2 or 3 more mana enablers, and I just had all the quellers. And granted, it's kind of the dream, but like just quelling all his little dudes so that they never even resolved and just killing him seemed really great.
Yeah.
Death Shadow.
Good.
Good to as close to the middle as you could probably get.
Yeah.
We already,
Similar to Affinity, except you start it good against a not great player, and you move really close to like 51% if they're really good.
we already talked about it, but Eldrazi Tron.
Horrendous.
Maybe the worst one.
Yeah, I actually count it as a loss. Like I consider it as they have a bye against me.
Yeah,
Is how I prep for an event.
I was thinking about it the other day because I was like, all right, we're going to do this talk. Maybe I want to like figure out what is my Eldrazi Tron matchup. And what I actually finally dawned on me, the reason from like way back to now that I just don't have a good Eldrazi Tron matchup is because they're a good Eldrazi Tron plan is because there isn't one. Like, I don't know.
The best I found was just trying to Thundermaw them.
Yeah, Thundermaw was
And
real nice.
some
Dude, I
amount
love
of the
that card.
time, they just have it dismember, and you just lose anyway.
Yeah, that is true. I feel like I've won against that deck in the weirdest ways, where it's like I resolve a Geist and then they attack with their Reality Smasher because they don't respect it, and then I manage to like get there through some strange combination of Snap, Cryptic, and Bolts, and it's just like kind of weird. But it didn't. It felt like I got super lucky.
Yeah, it just feels wrong. Yeah.
Burn.
Great, also hard to master.
Yeah,
just
I
like
agree.
Slump.
I think it's great, but hard to master.
Yeah.
Yep, that's how I would say.
I feel like Geist is super good there.
Yes. Very,
Tron.
very good.
Vanilla Tron.
Medium to slightly favorite.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Depending on exactly how your 75 is configured, it can range from like kind of bad, like fairly bad, to like pretty good.
Let's talk about what you think about the Titan Shift matchup, but also against Tron. Do you think it's important to disrupt them early, or do you just kind of play control right away, depend on the card you have?
So I approach both matchups the same way. Obviously, Spell Snare, whenever you have it and it lines up, that's awesome. But I just try and counter anything relevant that they do, and then just play Geist on 5 with like either Disdainful Stroke or Logic Not Up. And you just want to... Basically, anything they do that resolves is better than anything you can do in your deck. Mm-hmm. So you just want to make sure that never happens and eventually kill them. Because they don't actually have all that many threats. And they don't really have that many ways to find new threats. They're really good at assembling mana, not threats.
Talk about Valakut.
Yeah, both, really. Yeah. Tron has a little bit more threat density because of the Ancient Stirrings. But both decks are really good at assembling their mana, so I don't really like fighting on that axis if I can avoid it. I really like fighting on the threats, which is the thing they're lower on.
Mhm.
And then just trying to kill them while they're top decking.
Yeah, it's like one of those matchups where you have like a bad half of your deck game one, but if you draw the good half, I feel like you're actually like ahead. And against Tron and Scapeshift, I will usually just play Snapcaster as a 2/1 on turn 2 and just try to ride
you
that.
got
and
you
just
got to
attack
start the
them to
pressure.
death. Yeah.
Yeah, unless I have like somehow a lot of cards in my yard for a Logic Knot, and then I'm still gonna have a lot of cards for a Logic Knot, I'm gonna just raw dog my Snap.
I think against Titan Shift you do have to look at your hand, because if you know that you have a Geist, I think you can be more aggressive with your counter spells, and you're almost incentivized to. You have to hope they don't have Anger of the Gods.
Yeah,
by
just
the way.
hamstring them so that you can play the Geist.
But you know you're going to play Geist, and then you're going to kill them very quickly after that. And so it's kind of be like I'm at that point. I'm like, I don't like fighting over their mana ramp either, because I feel like that's just such a redundancy in their deck, and it's like I don't want to burn my precious counter spells on what you have 12 spells of. But if I know I have a Geist, I feel a little bit differently about it. Like I'm kind of fine because what I need is I need you to be one turn slower so that I can untap with Geist and like Cryptic or something and be killing you.
So I view it as the opposite, where like it's like, okay, I already have the Geist. Now I have something to play towards. All I want to do is running out of threats and then play it with a counterspell up. Right?
I guess I just feel like if you take too much time, they eventually just start playing lands and just shooting you
but
in the face.
if they're like raw, if they're just trying to natural valacute you, and you have a Geist specifically, they can't shoot the Geist, and they have to be playing 2 lands a turn to match you. Plus, you still have all your bolts in because you don't have enough cards to take out.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's
a good
point.
I definitely like racing a natural valacute with a Geist.
No, absolutely. I feel like the matchups where I struggle are the ones where I don't have Geist.
Yeah,
then
and I think that matchup is the most important one to have Geist.
Yeah, they can kind of play this weird controlling game plan with their lands and your Quellers. So good, bad, medium on that one.
I think it's the same as Tron, where it can be bad, all the way up to like quite good, depending on how your deck is configured.
Yep, I agree.
You just have to respect the matchup.
Counters Company.
Easiest matchup there is.
Yeah, really good. Really good.
I bring in Dispels there because I feel like the only card that really matters is Collected Company.
Oh yeah, it is Collected Company.
I don't board in sweepers against them because their deck is so bad against Spellcaller. Honestly, like I won't board in Verdict. I used to play Anger and I wouldn't bring it in because it kills my Spellcaller, so it's not worth it. They're just so bad. Quite poor, but you can make it pretty good if you prepare for it. If you bring the Ceremoniouses and the Artifact Hate.
Same for you, John?
Yeah, poor.
Dredge.
Arguably worse than Eldrazi Tron.
Yeah, arguably worse than Eldrazi Tron. I like that.
I'm not saying it's a winning... Well, it's a winning formula. I'm not saying that it would always happen, but I did have some success against them. I was running 2 Surgicals and 2 Staticcasters. And what I found is that if you just get rid of the prized amalgams, if you can find your Staticaster, you can literally basically kill everything else in their deck with Staticaster. Because all their Bloodghast are 2/1s and their other things are 1/1s, and then maybe you can kill them with Geist. But then also Geist plus Cryptic was pretty good, but I still think it was bad.
Yeah, so the issue I've always had with Surgical is like, we are at a black deck, so I'm just paying like a lot of life, and I pretty much have to snap it for it to be really good in the matchup. And then I just get conflagrated to the dome to death every time.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Rest in Peace is good, but...
Yeah, the Thundermaw was also the best card I found for that matchup, just trying to race them. Like, the June Invitational, I played 4 Rest in Peace and 3 Anger of the Gods and got smushed by Dredge still.
Yeah, it's not good.
It's like so bad. I just abandoned the matchup.
Okay, so I want to let's snap off these quick ones because I know you got some time constraints, Harlan. I want to make sure we get to some questions. But what about Abzan? Just traditional Abzan. Let's do Abzan and Jund as GBX decks.
Both good, barely like right around 50%.
Yeah, I think they're both good. I think they're both player dependent.
I think that's always been my like, whether it's Abzan or whether it's Jund. If you look at the whole matchups, it's always been like this big coin flip. It's like sometimes their cards just line up well against you. Sometimes your cards line up well against theirs. Obviously,
I think
landing is pretty
Sometimes the
bad,
game
but
goes for 30 turns. And
I would
it's
actually say
kinda
that-
whoever top deck's better.
I think Jun's pretty 50-50, and Abzan maybe is a little bit better. They're just more mid-rangey and a little bit bigger and a little bit better against us.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that.
Blue-white control.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. You're both playing like a similar game. However, their threats just cost 1 trillion mana, and you're just like, well, I have all this burn, kill you.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of times, like depending on what I have, one way to approach that matchup is like, well, you're not going to do anything, and I'm just going to wait till I have 8 cards in hands and bolt you, and then wait cards until I have 8 cards in hands and bolt you, and like you can't fight over every bolt, like you can just like do nothing, and then like occasionally.
And if they start
just
fighting
swing
over
burn.
bolts, they just die.
Right, exactly. Okay, so the last one would be Team or Breach.
I think that matchup is pretty bad, actually.
What matchup? To the breach?
Yeah,
the
Team or Breach.
blue
Yeah, the issue I have with the matchup is that they just like try to like blood moon you, and they have
I
more.
meant, is it Breach,
counter-
not Team or Breach, by the way.
Yeah, is it breach?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like when I played it in one league, it was like I just made the whole game about Blood Moon when I never cared about it, because I was like, I'm going to burn up all of your resources on these Blood Moons, and if I ever stick one, then I'm going to easily resolve this breach. But you kind of just had to fight over the Blood Moon a lot, and then it made resolving the breach a lot easier.
Yep.
Yeah, so the breach deck is just good against Jeskai. Like, it's really easy to pick a blue opponent apart with remands, and like you just get to a point where you just like breach end of turn, untap breach, and they're gonna lose the fight over one of those.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Harlan and Jonathan, for kind of the bit on the matchups. I do want to get to my viewer questions. I have some questions of my own, but I want to make sure to get some of my viewer questions out there first. So I'm just gonna start diving right into those. TL Hunter 07 from MTG Salvation runs a Discord channel, and he had a couple of his members on that Discord channel send me a couple of questions. By the way, next time I do this, I had like questions on Discord, questions on MTG Salvation, questions on Facebook, questions on YouTube. I was like, wow, my God, they're everywhere. I couldn't it was like hard to like remember where everybody had asked stuff. But he says, how do you beat burn with no hexproof cards in the sideboard? And he also wants to know what you think about Nimble Obstructionist. So it sounds like he might be playing a Jeskai list with no Geist, or maybe a control list, and wants to know how to beat burn.
Well, I think he might just be asking why we don't have like Leyline of Sanctity in our sideboard. That's kind of what I got out of that question.
Oh, no, I think you're right.
So
Oh, the matchup's great. That's why.
the burn
Yeah.
match. So I think the burn matchup is just like there's some checks also. One, just never shock yourself. Like literally, just never shock yourself. Sometimes I literally just get basic mountain just so I can like lightning bolt like one of their creatures.
Yeah, turn one goblin.
Yeah,
guy.
just
Bzz.
and you never use your lightning helix unless you're for sure going to get the 3 life off it. Like
Yeah.
for sure going to get 3 life off that spell.
I mean,
I will like.
I was gonna say one of my favorite ways to use life, and it's going along with what you're saying, but one of my favorite ways to use it is when I have 3 mana and a spell snare, because I'm like, go ahead, Skullcrack. This is gonna go so bad for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna counter your spell and gain 3 life.
Yeah, the easy things to improve the matchup are always make sure your Lightning Helix gains you 3 life. Never actually board out your Cryptics, because you just want hard counters, and the 2-for-1 is really important because you have more land in your deck than them. So in those longer games, which the games have to go longer for you to win, you need the extra card because you're going to draw more lands than them.
Okay. Yep. I agree with that.
Wow, I totally board out all of my Cryptics. I think they don't even matter. I think they're kind of a liability because a burn player
Really?
can just play. Yeah, burn player. A good burn player is like just gonna like, you're gonna like Cryptic something, and he's gonna be like, bzz, 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 bzz. Dude.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
No,
that's fine.
I mean, we're going to sit at like 14 for quite a while.
Yeah,
I
that's
just
fine.
want to have a hard counter for everything. Like, I want to line up as many trade my card for your cards as possible, because I just want to get to the later half of the game. And if I'm trying to do that anyway, eventually I'm going to draw more lands than them. So I need to catch up on cards so that I can make up for these extra land drops.
See, the way I approach that matchup is I take out the Cryptics, I bring in Dispels. I feel like we already have Spell Snares. Like, and if you have a Negate, that's fine too. and the logic knots are good. I leave this in. We already have enough counter magic. Then it pretty
Yeah,
much
I just forwarded more.
then it pretty much just comes about being like, all right, all I'm going to do is I'm going to kill your first couple of threats, and then I'm going to play Geist on 3, and you're going to be dead. Even if things have gone pretty reasonably, and like ridiculous hands aside, like if you just have dealt with their first 2 things and you play Geist on 3, you're going to out damage race them so badly, and you're still going to have interaction. You're still going to have counters. You're still going to have lightning helixes, and you might even just be able to like, why they try to bolt them out first. I feel like Geist, if you can deal with their first couple things and then play Geist on 3, the matchup's like almost unlosable.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much every matchup. But what I like to do is I want. I don't want, like, obviously every game I can play Geist on turn 3. I'm probably winning no matter what. Mm-hmm. I want to be built for the times that doesn't happen, and I have to play a normal game like I'm just a Jeskai deck without a Geist in it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because every time you don't draw Geist, it's like you're that deck. And every time you do draw it, I'm a Geist deck. And that's like the ups and downs of playing that card is you have one game plan when you have that card and a completely different game plan when you don't have it.
Yeah.
The burn matchup is definitely just a lot of bobbing and weaving. It's just like, when can you sequence your spells in a way where you'll take the least amount of damage?
Yeah.
And then find the turn where you can pull ahead. So usually you're just like, your mana base looks a little funky, and your cryptics won't usually happen until turn 5 or 6, but I still think they're good enough, and I think the worst card in the deck is just Electrolyze.
Yeah.
Board, so.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any thoughts on... Go ahead, Harlan.
Nimble Obstructionist. I think it's a cool card. I don't think it's better than Vendilion Click, and I don't think there's ever enough room to have both.
Yeah, I tested it because I was real excited about it, and my thoughts were, I was like, well, that was neat, but I'm not killing you.
Yeah, it's like...
I just want to kill you, and I didn't really... Now the game is going a little
stifled
longer.
when it came into play, it would be
then
a completely different story.
Yeah, I think you would actually just like play it if it just stifled.
Yeah, no, I think that would be... Yeah.
The issue is, like, you need these cards to be a clock. You can't have a lot of cards that just, like, are not a clock, and, like, you're boarding in against Storm, which I think that if you're a good you know what you're doing with Jeskai, you're already favored against Storm. So it's just, like, it's like a card. I think it's, like, more of a win more card than anything else.
Yeah, that was the main thing when I tested it was just, like, I was like, oh, that was so cool, I really got him, and then I was like, but I'm not killing him now. Like, I really need to play a creature
that's kind of my issue.
Yeah, it's kind of like a clunky Shadow of Doubt.
So then, on the same Discord chatter, Netter Mizuno says, how do you see the deck evolving in the future? What do you think do you think there are currently any underrated cards that should be played or tested in the main
Rattle
side?
Chains.
No.
This is one I've just been trying this week. So far it's been great. It definitely looks odd on paper, but it's played much better than I actually thought it would.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I do have one to mention for that. I actually think that the deck can probably get away with playing one Field of Ruin for a little bit of mana interaction with the opponents, and because the fact that it doesn't put you down a land like Ghost Quarter and Tectonic Edge did, and it also still gets a basic island for your Cryptic. I don't know if you can run 2 because you invariably are going to run in awkward situations, but I think 1 could be okay, and you might have those times where you're like, man, thank God I have this Field of Ruin. I can kill that Lantern Player's Academy Ruins or something like that.
I think you're supposed to, and I think you're supposed to kind of Colonnade for it. I think Colonnade actually just at its worst right now because everyone's trying to beat these Tron decks, and one of the ways they're doing it is just by blowing up their lands.
Yeah, I think I would only have 3 Colonnade even if I was playing 24 lands.
Mm-hmm.
I've played 3 Colonnades many times. I've gone between 24 and 23 lands. I mean,
yeah, I'm pretty concerned about playing another land that doesn't cast Lightning Helix with the 3 islands. That can be really
hurts
awkward.
Against burn. Yeah. It really hurts in some of the aggro decks. It hurts against.
I'm definitely a huge fan of Field of Ruin. I like it a lot as a 25th land in the board, so that you can play like an Elspeth or a Gearhulk if you want to go bigger. But I would shy away from playing it in my main 24 probably.
Yeah. One underrated card in the Jeskai deck that I think I might be going back to a little bit more, probably not right now because of all the land hate, is in October, a huge Reddit thread was about whether or not I was still playing Searcher's Kanta in my deck. It's like, there was like a thread, he's like, he 5-0'd on Monday with Search for his Kanta in his deck. And he 5-0'd on Friday without Search for his Kanta in his deck. And I just want to play Search of his Kanta again. It's just like one of my favorite cards. And it allows you to play like Elspeth in your sideboard because like you can reliably cast it because you just have another mana source in your deck. So I would want to like try to revisit Search for his Kanta. I'm probably gonna listen to Harlan and try out Rattle Chains because I usually when I listen to Harlan I win. So I don't know. Maybe I'll just do that.
I actually I played your 5-0 list and I found in that particular list my takeaway I took the list that you 5-0'd with and I played it and I recorded a league with it. And my takeaway was just like I think it was awesome. I just wanted it in a deck with less creatures, where basically I was going to hit more of the things that I wanted. And I thought it was really good, but if you're going to have like all these Quellers and Geists and Snaps and stuff, like I want to have things that I want to find in my Planeswalker, not have to like put the Queller on the I want to be able to find my win cons and find more of the cards I wanted.
Yeah, I think it's actually just better in the sideboard because the matchups you boarded in, you generally like are cutting your Quellers because you're trying to grind them out. And the issue I have with Queller against all these grinding decks is that they have so much removal now that I just like don't want to try to pick that fight. I think Harlan probably has a different answer on this, but against like these Jund decks and like the Grixis decks, I just want to be like bad Jeskai control and just like have all these burn spells that I'll eventually just kill them with.
So my thoughts on Search for Azcanta is that I think that it's not like a good card to slot into decks. I think decks need to be built for the card, a lot like Geist of St. Traft, where it's this really powerful card that shifts you in one direction, and like the game becomes about that card from the time it's in play. And you need your deck to be equipped to use the card instead of having it be something mixed into your game plan.
No, I think I would probably agree with you on that, Harlan, because when I also played the Aliantrazi list, it just felt like you can find all your spicy one-ofs. Like, and I even wanted to put a Rev in the board in the Rev in the list if that's what you wanted. But you can have all these like one-ofs, like your one of Nahiri if that's what you need. You can find it with this Azcanta. You're Secure the Waste, the Rev if you have it, and then you have Planeswalkers and very few creatures, and so you're really maximizing the capabilities of the card and really building around it.
I still think that Search is best home is in these tempo decks. I need to I do. The issue I have with Search in these control decks is a lot of your spells are just super clunky. And I think Search decks are at its best when all your spells are efficient.
But but if you're a tempo deck, when are you having time to be like, I'm going to pay 3 mana to do nothing and find a card?
Yeah, it's kind of like in the Kiki Moon deck that I just did well to open with. I cut Lighthouse after the tournament because Desolate Lighthouse I never was activating. I was behind because all my cards are cheap and efficient and not that powerful.
People ask me all the time, like, why don't you run Desolate Lighthouse in your Jeskai decks? Because I never use it. Like I'm always doing something.
Well,
and
with Jeskai specifically, I want every land I draw. I want every bolt I draw. I want every path I draw. There's not a card I want to discard with Lighthouse in the Jeskai
That's
deck.
another good point. I just always felt like in a Jeskai mid, it's not the same as Jeskai Draw Go, because in Jeskai Draw Go you have like this. You typically have a reward for getting that far, whether it's Secure the Waste or Sphinx's Revelation. You have something to like now pull really far ahead and reward you for getting in the long game. But where I felt like Jeskai mid range is like, if you're playing the 4 Cryptic Command list, you're a little bit better than some of the older Jeskai decks, but you don't really have the technology in the deck to be like, all right, now that I have 8 lands in play, these are all the great things I can do.
It's weird because I think that you do. Is just with how I play the Jeskai deck is that with how you play it with Search, I think is completely different than how you play it without Search of Azcanta in your deck and you have Geist. Because like usually you're just like trying to like kill them. But the thing about Search is that you're a 4 Cryptic Command deck. It's like your best hit. And when you're activating Search of Azcanta, the only creature that you want to grab at that point forward is Snapcaster Mage. Like obviously putting Spellcaller at the bottom can be kind of awkward, but you're not going to miss. And your deck is just all burn spells that when you activate Search, find a burn spell and then burn them. I actually think that's like a realistic way to win a game.
I don't know. It's like paying 3 mana once to find a bolt and bolt them once a turn is kind of a slow way to go about it. But
I agree.
You're not inherently wrong, but
I think the
I'm going to
creatures are
revisit
actually
it.
the best cards in the tempo deck. And like that's the reason you're playing the tempo deck is the creatures are the best cards.
Well, the reason I don't, the same with Azcanta and Lighthouse, are just that I pretty much feel like I don't think you're a super late game deck. I think you can be. You have some tools, but you don't have the payoff spells. And ultimately, what you really want to be doing is upping the density of spells that like actually kill them and generate tempo. And like, and Azcanta just kind of goes in a completely other direction. Azcanta wants to like the game to go really long, and the more value you accrue from it, you'll win that way.
Also, the Azcanta decks all have a Secure the Waste, which is like a win condition that you can find off of the Azcanta, where we're literally just trying to find 7 bolts.
Yeah.
I mean, which is possible. It's definitely possible. Listen, man, it was sweet in that league I 5-0'd. I did play against 5 grindy decks, but it was sweet.
It's funny. I don't even know how good it would be against like Jund or Abzan, just because like if you play it and then they just abrupt decay it, maybe you're fine with that. You're just trading card for card, but I guess
it's bad there, but that's where it's at its best. Because if it flips, they literally cannot beat it. They literally cannot beat it. They're just gonna lose. Like I had a flip search against Liliana. And I'm like, well, you're gonna lose.
I mean, they boarded Fulminator Mage against you anyway.
Yep.
So
That's my main issue is that everyone now is playing Field of Ruins and Molten Rains and Spreading Seas and Ghost Quarters and Tech Edges. This format doesn't like lands very much. Moali, Forest Acid thing, whatever that card's called.
Oh, that card. I mean, like obviously we have plenty of ways to interact with it. But when it happens, it's like you jerk.
Moali Acid Moss. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, you blew up one of my lands.
Yeah, all right. Whenever my opponent goes turn 1 Utopia Sprawl, this game.
Okay, so next question. This is from the MTG competitive blue-white X mid-range control community on Facebook, run by my friend Neo Amati. One of the members, Michael, it's either Ricci, R-I-C-C-I, or Richie, Michael Ricci. He wants to know, for somebody who loves Jeskai and recently finished foiling out the deck, he wants to know what would happen if the meta shifts and Jeskai is no longer... His concern is that the meta will shift and Jeskai is no longer in a good position. So his question is, what would it take for the meta to shift to make Jeskai bad?
I think I talked about this, and I think Jeskai currently is not great because everyone going into this weekend knew that they had to beat Lantern Control, and I think the most popular way that people realize to do that is just by playing Tron, and people are just playing varieties of Tron decks that are good against Lantern. So I think
when you say Tron, you mean like the more vanilla Tron decks, not the Eldrazi.
Yeah, vanilla Tron. A Sam Party at GP Oklahoma City this weekend registered Eldrazi Tron. Like people are playing these Tron decks, they're just trying to prey on these Lantern decks. So I think this weekend is a bad point for it, but I think moving forward, people are going to realize that the metagame's going to keep like circling. It just always goes around in a circle. So now people are just going to be like, okay, well, to beat these decks, I'm going to play humans and Grixis Death Shadow. And Jeskai's good at beating those decks. So I think that moving forward, Jeskai is only going to get more well-positioned. But I think from the past, 2 weeks to now, I think it's just been going downhill. But I think it's going to start shifting back when people start playing humans and Shadow to counteract these Tron decks.
So I don't think Jeskai will ever be poorly positioned enough to not play it. It's just a good modern deck. It's like for the people who love playing Bogles for whatever reason, you can always play it, and you can cash every event you play with Bogles. Mm-hmm. It's completely possible. Modern, as the format we love, is kind of the pairings lottery, and Jeskai is has some really bad matchups, mm-hmm. but you can make some of the really bad ones pretty good, and pretty much everything else is close to at least 50%. Mm-hmm. So, and the beauty of Jeskai is you get to play Magic against these decks.
I think it really rewards player skill too. I think having played mm-hmm. it for years, the better you get at the better you get with Jeskai, just the better you're going to do. Like the ceiling for how good you can, the more you learn about the metagame, the more you learn about opponents' decks, the more you learn about your own decks. It's really going to affect your performance. Yeah. My point is, if you just foiled out your deck, don't worry about it. I would my recommendation would be I have a foiled Jeskai deck. Do what I do. Just play it no matter what. No matter. Yeah. In Modern is so vast, sometimes you won't even play against those decks. And if you do think you're going to be playing against Tron, I mean, one of the great things about Jeskai is there's so many little things you can do to tweak and pivot the deck to make it a little bit better in this area or a little bit better in this area. And the more that you play it, the better you're going to get at knowing what those things are that you need to do.
There are so many good cyber cards for this deck.
So many.
It's not even playable cyber cards. There are so many cyber cards that I think are completely playable, and I'm sad to not play some of them. Batterskull. It's kind of insane. No, Batterskull's not on that list at all.
Batterskull.
No, I miss playing Batterskull. Have you ever put a Batterskull in a Geist of Saint draft? I have.
No, I have not. I don't think.
Can't play anymore. Call Against Command just makes that card just...
Yeah, Call Against
I
Command
remember the days of Batterskull when every deck had one because it was the best card in the format. But
now Call Against Command doesn't work.
Yep.
Okay, so moving on here, we got moving on to people who asked directly on my channel or my Facebook page. Thank you guys. Okay, so from my channel, Lauren Bennett wants to know the reasons to play Jeskai and what the good and bad matchups are. Thank you for the question, Lauren. I think we did a pretty good job of addressing that. We kind of talked about why you guys like Jeskai. We kind of touched on all of the different matchups. So I think that we probably did a pretty good job answering your question, Lauren. Okay, so next question is from Eric Byrne. He wants to know, is it better to run Opt, Serum Visions, or a split of both in a Jeskai tempo list? I think there are times when casting Serum Visions at sorcery speed can become awkward for wanting to be somewhat reactive, but by not casting it, you might lose a valuable turn to set up. Opt doesn't give the same setup, but it's more flexible. What do you guys think? Opt, Serum Visions?
I am a very strong believer in Serum Visions in Jeskai. I have this week been playing Opt, and it's been confirming why I don't like Opt better than Serum Visions. Sure, it's better with certain draws, like when you want to Logic Knot, you can represent Bolt or whatever, and go end a turn Opt. But in the games of Jeskai that I like to play, is that the two cards that you're scrying off Serum Visions really matters, and it lets you set up turns in a game where that you just get to get to pace yourself in a way where you're going to pull out ahead. And I actually touched about that in my article about Serum Visions, and I think if you cast Serum Visions correctly, it is way better than Opt.
Harlan?
I fully agree. I think Serum Visions is an automatic 4-of in all of these decks because it's so important to set up your next couple turns or even just only your next turn. And I think Opt is a pretty good inclusion on top of it if you can fit in one or two. Playing the Kiki Moon deck and having 4 of each, Opt is very good, but Serum Visions is the backbone of these decks.
I think one thing to point out to Eric too is you got to remember you are playing a deck in which you have two halves of it, and it can be really important in some matchups to use the scry from Serum Visions to be I don't want to draw this part of my deck. And so when I see those cards, I'm going to put those on the bottom because I need to be playing this kind of game plan, and I want to try to increase the probability I'm going to draw these other type of cards in my deck, and then vice versa. There's times when you're I don't want those cards, but I want these cards. And Opt just doesn't give you that kind of planning and library manipulation that Serum Visions does.
Mm-hmm. Also, one more thing about it being Serum Visions being awkward to fit in on your curve. The longer the game goes, the better the card gets because you're setting up more impactful draws the later the game goes. So if you think it's pretty awkward for you to cast here and you don't really want to, just hold it.
Yeah,
you don't have to fire it off.
Yeah, you don't.
That's the difference between Opt and Serum that I've noticed. Every time I'm scrying and I see an Opt on top of my deck, it is almost just completely correct to bottom it. Because all it does is takes a mana to do what I'm doing right now. And then so it's just better to put it at the bottom and get a random draw.
Yeah, it's not wasting
almost every time.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously not Brainstorm, but that's kind of the adage from Legacy is the best Brainstorm is the one you don't cast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of view them in modern power level as Serum Visions as Brainstorm and Opt as Ponder.
I think that's fair.
I think their power levels are, in some situations, Ponder is better than Brainstorm.
Sure.
And in the vast majority of situations, Serum Visions is way more powerful than Opt.
Yep. It's my favorite mode on Serum Visions is that exactly what Harlan said. If you are just well, it's kind of awkward to cast it here, or you don't know what you need, then you just hold it because having the most information and then using Serum Visions is going to be really powerful.
Right. All right, so that concludes part 1 of the Jeskai roundtable. I hope you enjoyed it. I know that I enjoyed talking Jeskai with Harlan and Jonathan, and I'm looking forward to doing it again. As a reminder, I'm probably not going to be able to meet them until January 14th, so look to the weekend after that for part 2 of the Jeskai roundtable. And everybody, thank you very much for watching all of my videos. Thank you for the support, the views, the likes, the subscriptions. It means a lot to me. I will talk to you guys soon, and until then, bye for now.